Hi, I'm James O'Hara, and so the book I chose to read for my podcast was actually Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. And if you haven't read it already, I highly recommend it. It's a really, really good book. I actually really enjoyed it. Um, so to kind of dive into the book, I don't really want to get too much away, though I I do need to kind of explain what's going on so you can kind of get a greater context. It takes place in a very different world than we live in, and so with that in mind, um, well, can I summarize it right now? So the book is an autobiography by Frank McCourt. Um, it is him growing up in poverty in Brooklyn and Limerick, that'd be Ireland, during the 1930s and 40s. You know, and to really make matters worse, Sad's already living in poverty. His dad is an alcoholic who drinks up to week's wages every single week. So they don't really have anything, and their father is not dependable at all. And the book really covers all the struggles he and his family has to go through, whether because of living in poverty, because of his father, or other things going on. It kind of covers until he was 19. And the book, I have to warn you, is not for the faint of heart. It deals with a lot of deep ideas and which are kind of daggers in a way of loss, regret, existential dread, and really the complexities of religion. So, of course, these are not just surface level topics. It's kind of going down to a deeper level. Um, it's also kind of important when you dive into this book to kind of remember what was going on globally. Um, you know, Frank was born in 1930 in Brooklyn, and in case you weren't aware, that would be the beginning of the Great Depression. And of course, with that, the Great Depression, there was no jobs, there was widespread poverty across the nation of the United States where he was born. Um, though they made the mistake when he was 5, that'd be 1935, of actually moving to Limerick, Ireland, which, in case you weren't aware, is not the place to move during a Great Depression, believe it or not. And another thing to kind of keep in mind is the troubles, and that'd be capital T troubles. And I'm not talking about the ones during the later ones during the 60s and 80s. I'm talking about the ones during World War One, particularly in 1916. And that's important because they actually fought with the early IRA against the British and Northern Ireland, and that'd be because they wanted Northern Ireland back to be part of Ireland. And of course, there were differences. For example, Northern Ireland is backed by the English, and they're Protestant, and so was Northern Ireland, and of course, Ireland is Catholic. Um, and that's just the beginning of many differences. But overall, it kind of leaves his dad to be kind of left. Now he doesn't really fit in anywhere. Because another one, he doesn't fit in Northern Ireland because he betrayed them fighting with the IRA um, and the English. And then number two, he doesn't really fit in Southern Ireland because, well, he's Northern Irish and they really do not like them. And they're blaming him for everything that goes wrong in their lives, which I guess they're not partially wrong, but it's still terrible to think about. And it kind of leaves Frank kind of left to wander until he kind of finds a place to fit in, you know. And to kind of go talk about the speaker a little bit more, Frank McCourt, this is an autobiography, and so it's important to know that he may add a little bit of bias to the facts, but the fact of the matter is that he experienced all these things going on during the book, and so the emotions are going to be very, very raw, and so you can really feel them as you read. And something he does is that he doesn't use quotation marks. Now, I've never read a single book ever in the history of ever that doesn't use quotation marks, or at least kind of to cover who's talking. Though in the book, I know you may think, okay, wouldn't that be kind of confusing to read? As you know, books were built a lot of dialogue. Um, though no, it's actually used really, really well because he actually used it to kind of show how confusing the world around him is. And it kind of as the book kind of shifts from beginning to end, it kind of shifts how he uses it. For at the beginning, it gets really, really complicated because it's really hard to read, frankly, because of course he's younger, he doesn't really understand the world around him. And then by the end of the book, he really understands it, and you can kind of break down who's talking, whatever. For example, in the quote, at the beginning of the book, after baptism, Philomena said she had tea, ham, and cake in her house around the corner. Malachi, Frank's father, said tea. She said yes, tea, or is it whiskey you want? He said tea was grand, but he'd have to go and deal with John Erlane, who didn't have the decency to carry his duties as godfather. Andrew said, "You're only looking for an excuse to run to the speakeasy." He said, "As God is my witness. The drink is the last thing on my mind." Andrew started to cry. "Your son's christening day, and you have to go drinking?" This is part of a larger conversation right now. And, during that larger conversation, it's really about argument. And, of course, the aunt gets involved, too. And, since this argument is between a husband and wife, mother and father, this is a very deep and, very heated argument. And so, of course, with Frank being very, very young, with his only being 5 at the time, and his younger brother, Malachi, named after his father, being the one being christened, it really kind of shows how chaotic the situation, how he doesn't really understand what's going on. And I think in that regard, I think the writing style right there actually was very, very good. Though I don't think I really did it justice at all. Though, another thing to kind of keep in mind when you're reading it is that this book is meant for an American audience, so really meant for us. And, that's really because he lived in Ireland, and he has a very strong opinion about the Irish lifestyle and ideals. Though he also talks poorly about the English, and that would be, of course, being a result of him living in Ireland so long and them not really being friends all too much. But whenever he talks about America, it's always in a positive context. And, beyond it just being for Americans, it's really for a new generation. Of course, as I talked about, he wrote about his time in the 1930s and 40s. Though his book was written in 1996, and that would be, of course, 60 years after he was born. Well, 66 years after he was born. But, he's writing to people who maybe like comfortable lives, people who haven't experienced the same point of time as he has. And, he knows that he maybe has a little bit of a disconnect between the two. And so he actually tries to connect with them. He doesn't want his life to be just like a soap opera, He actually wants his life to actually be applicable and actually realize, okay, he's a real person, For example, he uses the line, "When you're 11 and your brothers are 10, 5, and 1, you know what to do when you go to someone's house, even if she's your mother's sister. You're told to leave the pram in the hall and bring the baby into the kitchen. But if it's not your house, you know what to do once you get into the kitchen, for fear the aunt will yell at you or hit you on the skull." She takes off her coat and takes it to the bedroom. You stand with the baby in your arms, waiting to be told what to do. If you take one step forward and one step to the side, she might come out and say, "What are you doing?" You don't know where, but you don't know what to answer, because of course you don't know. If you say anything to your brothers, she might come out and say, "Who do you think you're talking to? In my kitchen?" I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy, and for right there, it kind of seems like he's building a situation, kind of building a connection with the audience, so he can actually build the joke. Though in this case, it's not really a joke; it's more like explain the situation. There we go. It really kind of brings a closeness to him. It's as if that we were kind of standing out in the forest while he's telling a story around the campfire. He's kind of inviting us all to the campfire to actually live out what he's talking about, live out a story. And, like I mentioned, it is based off of Frank McCourt's life, and so of course, not every single day or every single year is gonna have the same different tone. It changes a lot. In fact, when you kind of see the tone shift from when he was younger, starting from when he was born, he didn't really have a tone when he was born, of course, but his writing style from when he was younger to when he was 19, almost 20. It kind of moves from like a humorous, lighthearted tone to kind of a more bleak, matter-of-fact sort of tone. For example, on page 43 at the very beginning, it has the funny interaction between him and his aunt. Two women are at the door. They say, "Who are you?" "I'm Frank." "Frank, how old are you?" "I'm 4, going on 5. "You're not very big for your age, are you?" "I don't know." As you can kind of tell in that quote, he's being insulted by his aunts, but he doesn't really know it or care to even respond. I think obviously with him writing it from a mature angle, him being older, he actually can kind of find humor in some of these situations, and I think he actually does right there. Though, it's kind of important to remember is that, there's a very lighthearted situation, he actually makes the best of it, and though he doesn't really do that throughout the whole book. For example, in the end of the book, he almost seems broken in life. Um, for example, in the quote, I wander down Henry Street till the rain drives me into Franciscan Church, where St. Francis stands with his birds and lambs. I look at him and wonder why I ever prayed to him. No, I didn't pray. I begged. Now, this is a really strong passage, and I'm sorry, it just bothered me. I begged him to intercede with Teresa Comedy, but he never did a thing. He stood up there on his pedestal with his little smile, the birds, the lambs. He didn't give a fiddler's far about Teresa or me. I'm finished with you, St. Francis. I'm moving on. Francis, I don't even know why they gave me that name. I'd be better off if they called me Malachi, one of a king, the other great saint. Why didn't you heal Teresa? Why did you let her go to hell? You let my mother climb to the loft. You let me get into a state of doom. Little children's shoes scattered in concentration camps. I won't really cover all the details right there, because of course that would kind of spoil the book for you. But it is kind of important to know that Teresa actually was the love of his life at the time. With him dying, he felt very emotionally damaged. The reason why he just asked, why do you let her go to hell? Is that he feels that she didn't live a fully Christian life, and she planned on it, though she just didn't get around to it. And so it feels like it was his fault in a way for kind of just allowing her to do that instead of actually stepping in. And he actually decides, is kind of him moving on from religion. He basically feels abandoned. Because of course, I don't know if you know this or not, but in the Catholic religion, you have to get to God, you have to pray through saints and different things. And of course, he was praying to Saint Francis, because that's the one he was named after, being Frank. And of course, it mentions the Holocaust too, and all the other horrible things. And he really feels abandoned. And as if he was ignored. And it's real sad, because that's how he feels. He feels that no one cares about him. And it kind of shows by his mom climbing into the loft instead of actually helping him. Because of course, she actually had an affair with another guy, and of course, the other guy insulted Frank after Frank stood up to him. She didn't really just comfort Frank. She went back to him, and Frank really felt abandoned there too. And it really kind of shows how damaged he is as a person. But at the beginning of the book, at least, he actually uses dark humor as a kind of reprieve from despair. It's not really a normal humor. Like, it's kind of like, ooh, knock knock, who's there? No, not that sort of thing. For example, in the quote, we can really see him using dark humor. And I don't know what to do till Billy Campbell says, we'll go back to St. Joseph's and pray that now on everyone in Mikey Spolaski's family will die in the middle of the summer. He'll never get a day off from school for the rest of his life. One of our prizes is surely answered, because next summer Mikey himself is carried off by the galloping consumption, so he won't get a day off from school, and that'll surely teach him a lesson. In case you weren't aware, the consumption was actually death. And of course, they're actually praying for him to die, because Mikey actually asked Frank and his other friend, Billy Campbell, had she prayed that his sister died in the summer, not in the summer, sorry, so that he could have time off of school, and he promised them that he would actually give them treats and everything while he was off of school. Though, of course, he actually got in trouble for saying that, and of course, it was funny enough is that though he was praying for his sister to die during the summer, Mikey actually died in the summer. So it's kind of ironic there, but it's kind of dark humor. You're praying for someone else to die, and suddenly they die out of nowhere. And strangely, it's kind of funny, even though it's terrible. So basically, yeah, it's an example of dark humor. And there's more dark humor throughout the book, but that's just an example I thought was really, really good. Then, for example, the main idea would be that Frank is using this book to overcome all the obstacles and achieve his dreams and the terrible childhood he had growing up poor, and all the challenges along the way. It's a really strong message that no matter what the odds, if you devote yourself to something, you can accomplish it through hard work, determination, and hope. And, he really shows that idea of hope through dynamic characters. For example, in the quote, he puts on his cap. He asks to see a man. Man says, go see your man, but don't come home drunk to the house tonight, saying Riley McCourtley or anything else. He comes home drunk, but he's quiet and passes on the floor next to Mam's bed. We have Christmas dinner because of the food voucher Mom got from the St. Vincent Paul Society. We have sheep's head, cabbage, and white potatoes, and a bottle of cider. Because, well, it's Christmas. He tells her again he's not hungry, but if no one else wants him, he'll eat the sheep's eyes. He says that it's great nourishment in the eye, and we all make a sound of disgust. He washes them down with his tea and smokes the rest of his wood brine, which would be a cigarette. He actually puts on his cap and goes upstairs for his suitcase. Ma'am says, "Where are you going?" "London." "On the day of our Lord? Christmas?" And so, from there on, increasingly more aware is that obviously he was drinking away of the wages, and that's a really selfish thing. And because add on top of that, he actually came home drunk every single night saying Rotherham McCourtly, and then if he didn't sing Rotherham McCourtly, he actually bugged the boys about dying for Ireland. And that's really important that he came home drunk, but quietly. It kind of shows that character shift. And not only that, but he actually ate the sheep's head, sheep's head's eyes. The least desirable part. It really kind of shows how selfish he's being. And then number 3, the third big thing that came from that was he actually went to London, which he despises London, because he felt abandoned after the IRA broke up, and he actually felt abandoned by them. So, but he's actually going over there for work to actually support them, and that's a really big difference compared to drinking the week's wages away. Like I said earlier, with him using this to kind of deal with his parents' deaths, there will be a lot of raw emotions in the book. The main ideas though were sadness, hope, but there's a lot of humor too, and that is kind of related to the hope. And Frank McCourt actually uses a first-person writing style, and it really helps show off these kind of emotions. And, for example, Frank writes, "Limerick gained a reputation for piety. All we knew it was for the rain. The master says it's a glorious thing to die for Ireland and the faith. And Dad says it's a glorious thing to die for Ireland. But I wonder if there's anyone in the world who'd like to see us live." That would be coming from an 8-year-old. And frankly, if I heard any 8-year-old say, "It's never sunny, it only rains, the only reason to live is to die," and that would just really I'd be concerned about that 8-year-old, because that is a really, really dark point of view on the world. But something interesting is that he actually subtracts himself from the world. And I think that's actually good in that case, because, for example, he writes, "It's a lovely thing to know that the world can't interfere with what's inside your head." So that kind of sets it off that, okay, he doesn't really want to associate with the bad part of the world. He wants to be himself. And he says, "I'll get the money someday for a house or a flat with electric light and a lavatory and beds and sheets and blankets like the rest of the world. We'll have breakfast in a bright kitchen with flowers dancing in the garden beyond. Delicate cups and saucers, egg cups, and eggs soft in the yolk and ready to melt into the rich, creamy butter. A teapot with cozy in it and a toast with butter and marmalade galore." These 2 lines kind of show that he's hopeful about his future. He separates himself from the gloomy world around him. He says, "Forget it. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to live with my imagination." You can really see that hope, and that's part of the goodness of him. And, part of that goodness right there is actually showed off through his humor. For example, he actually kind of uses it to break up the otherwise morbid tale of his life. And, for example, he actually writes, "When they move to Ireland, they are confronted with fleas in the mattress of the bed, and the father is instructed by a man on the street to confuse the buggers," and the buggers would be the fleas. And of course, their solution would be to turn the mattress upside down, which they do. And of course, that's just terrible because, number one, they just moved to Ireland and found out there is no jobs, and so they are going to be extremely in a bad situation. And then to add on top of it, the bed they all have to share, all 6 of them at the time. And his younger siblings die, unfortunately. Though the bed has fleas, which is terrible. But he actually talks about it in a positive and kind of funny way. He actually finds a way to laugh about it. He doesn't really take it terribly. And so obviously, like I talked about, Frank McCourt actually started on this book after coming to terms with his parents' deaths in 1995, and actually 10 years after his parents' death, with his dad dying in 1981 and his mom in 1985. yeah, I think after his parents' death, she actually kind of came to understand why they did what they did. And of course, by writing this book, it actually helped him put all that terribleness and horrible things he went through behind him so he can move on with his life. And of course, he was nearly 50, 60 years old, so he's lived basically a full life already. But he just really wanted to just, I don't know, put that behind him because it really played a part on him. I think his parents' deaths actually reminded him of it. It reminded him that, maybe I didn't really fully appreciate them. And, it kind of helped him write from a mature and understanding tone of everything that happened. And so, it really, in that regard, it really helped him come to terms with his death. So ultimately, he's writing the book for himself to help himself deal with it. And that's kind of like the why now of it. Why is he writing this book now? 6 years after what happened, you're not really gonna fully remember that, are you? But no, the book isn't really just meant to do that. It's meant for a different purpose, and that'd be to help deal with them and get over his parents' deaths. And um, and of course, to really convey the amount of suffering he went through, um, it's a very bleak book, but it gives us hope that no matter the situation, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, and it's also there to kind of remind us how thankful we should be about the lives that we live. Um, and that most of us don't have to go through the suffering he did. You know, and we can really see that through his use of foreshadowing. For example, we see foreshadowing when Frank finds out he's a bastard, and I don't mean that in a swear word way, at the bar with his friend. At the end of the encounter, Frank's friend's dad has a revelation that he's going to give up drinking and move to England to find work. And as I mentioned in one of the earlier passages, actually, this seems to kind of foreshadow Frank's father being mature and going to England without drinking the week's wages away, which kind of leaves us once again to be hopeful for Frank's future. And that's kind of the whole point of the book. The whole point of the book is for really us to, kind of realize that no matter what type of hell we're going through, it doesn't have to end terribly for us. We have the option to make our lives better, and ultimately, it's never too late for anyone to change. And I think it's really good to kind of end the book on that positive message because, frankly, it's a very depressing book for most of it. Though there are positive parts, and I think that positive ending really wraps it up. You really see it going one way, but then of course it's like a perfect line. It starts off happy, it kind of goes to sadness, and then there's a little U-turn back to happiness at the end of the book. And now I won't really spoil that what the happiness is exactly at the end of the book, though I'll just tell you it's really, really good. And thanks for listening to my podcast. I really appreciate it, and hope you have a great day. Oh, I have trouble with my mouse right now. Yeah, there we go.